didn't expect a red carpet. I didn't need applause or camera flashes. Honestly, I didn't even need a seat at the front. I just wanted to be there to show up for her, to make her proud, to remind her that she didn't get here alone. That behind every milestone of hers, there was someone quietly standing in the shadows, clapping the loudest, that someone was me. That night, I stepped out of the car a little earlier than planned. I wanted to surprise her. The black tux I wore was the same one from our wedding, tailored again, a little tighter around the shoulders. Now, I held a small, elegant box in my hand. Inside was a Mont Blanc timepiece, limited edition, black leather band, sapphire crystal face. She'd once mentioned it casually when passing through a boutique in Milan. Understated, but powerful, she said. Just like you. I walked up to the venue, heart light, steps firm. The lights from the ballroom streamed through tall windows like golden silk. It was Argento and Gray's 10-year anniversary, a night Isla had been working toward for months, actually for years, and I'd helped build it piece by piece. From quiet dinners discussing strategy to weekends, I gave up so she could rehearse speeches. From seed capital to late-night coffee runs, the foyer was buzzing with guests, men in tailored suits, women in elegant gowns, champagne flutes clinking softly as jazz floated in the background. I approached the reception desk, smiling. "Red Callahan," I said, adjusting my cuff slightly. "Here for Isla." The young woman behind the desk typed something. Then again, her expression shifted. "I'm sorry," she said, voice polite but brisk. "I don't see that name on the list." I blinked, surprised but calm. "Could you check again? I'm her husband." She hesitated and glanced toward a man standing near the door, earpiece in his ear, hand resting on his belt. "Security." "I'll call someone," she offered, clearly uncomfortable. Moments later, a tall man in a charcoal gray suit walked toward us. I recognized him instantly. Damon, Isla's CFO. We'd met a few times. He gave me a cursory nod. "Reed." "Hey, there seems to be a mix-up with the guest list," I said lightly, still holding the gift box. Damon didn't bother to look at the list. "This event's just for core staff and major stakeholders." I frowned. "I helped fund this event, right?" he said, glancing at his watch. "But you're not technically part of the leadership team." That stung. I opened my mouth to reply, but he beat me to it, turning to the guard nearby. "He's not on the list. Please escort him out." The guard stepped forward gently but firmly. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." I didn't speak. Not yet. And then Damon, as he turned back toward the ballroom, said it, not even under his breath. "Get this beggar out of here." That's when the room seemed to slow. Beggar. I stood there, tux perfectly pressed, holding a gift that cost more than the average rent in the city. And somehow, in their world, I was a beggar. I looked past him into the ballroom. There she was, Isla, standing under a chandelier surrounded by executives and board members. Her dress was emerald green, her smile wide. She was radiant, powerful, exactly how I'd always wanted her to feel. But something inside me, something buried under years of quiet sacrifices, cracked. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. Instead, I turned. I walked back down the marble steps, past the valet, who smiled politely and clearly had no idea what had just happened. I didn't give him the ticket for the car. I needed a moment. I walked 2 blocks in silence, still holding the box. My phone buzzed once, probably a promotional email. Not Isla. She didn't know yet. Or maybe she did. Maybe it was intentional. I wasn't sure what was worse. I sat on a cold bench outside a closed bakery, and finally opened the box, not to look at the watch, but just to breathe. I stared at the clean design, the engraved back plate that said, "For all the time you gave me." The irony nearly made me laugh. It wasn't just a watch. It was a thank you, a symbol of time spent supporting her dreams, of hours and years I gave without asking for much. Not credit, not a seat at the board, just respect, just a place at her side. And yet, on the night of her biggest celebration, the man who watched her rise from shaky proposals to Forbes interviews had become invisible, worse, unwelcome. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was numb. Numb in the way you get when you realize the person you built your world around never really built theirs around you. I sat there for almost an hour thinking, replaying conversations. The times I said, "Let's wait on that vacation, put it into the company instead." The nights I packed her lunches before big pitch-me eatings. The time I stayed up until 4 a.m., adjusting her keynote slides because her designer quit last minute. How many of those sacrifices had become expectations? And how many of those expectations had turned into a razor? I walked home. I didn't slam doors or throw the watch against the wall like some bitter eggs in a soap opera. No, that wasn't me. I walked into our apartment, clean, minimalist, filled with curated art pieces she loved, and placed the watch on the marble counter. Then I stood still, and something in me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. I realized that somewhere along the line, I had been edited out of the story. I was the invisible ink in the footnotes. And now they were celebrating the novel, pretending I never helped write the first chapters. I looked around at the space we built together. And for the first time in a long time, I started thinking not about how to support her next move, but how to make mine. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like it might give me answers. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No footsteps on the marble tiles. No humming from the bathroom as Isla got ready. No scent of her perfume floating through the hall. Just silence. Heavy and clear. She'd stayed out after the gala. Of course, she had probably went straight to the hotel suite they'd booked for the night. A perk I'd prepaid with my own card 3 months ago when I still believed I'd be at her side, smiling for pictures and clinking glasses. When I still believed I was part of the journey, I took my coffee black, no cream today. Something about sweetness felt wrong. As I stood by the window, looking over the city we'd carved our lives into, my mind wandered back through the years. Quiet, steady memories that now played like proof in a courtroom. We met when Isla was just launching her Gin 2 in Grey. Back then, it was her in a small rented office with peeling paint and a stubborn thermostat. I remember bringing her takeout during late nights, setting up a makeshift whiteboard with sticky notes because she couldn't afford one. I remember pulling out a small loan under my name to help cover her first marketing run. "It's just until we land that first big client," she'd said. "You'll get it back." I wasn't looking for reimbursement. I was looking for partnership, for something we could build together. But somehow, over time, it became her dream and my responsibility, her spotlight and my shadow. She started climbing fast, networking, closing deals, building a brand. And I clapped. I clapped even when she stopped introducing me as her husband at some events, opting instead for Reed. "He works in finance," as if that explained my presence better. She loved the image, the story of the girl boss who made it on her own, who rose without help. And I let her tell it because I loved her. But now it felt like I'd paid for a ticket to a movie I wasn't allowed to watch. Worse, like I'd funded the production and been cut from the credits. I pulled open the drawer next to the fridge where we kept old receipts and warranties. Most people forgot about those drawers. Messy little timelines of financial choices. I didn't. I kept every receipt, every bank statement, every invoice tagged and filed. I'd always been meticulous. Isla teased me about it once, said I was financially romantic. I guess that's one way to say you're doing all the boring, important things while I take the glory. That drawer held our real history. A lease payment here, a conference fee there, new laptops for her interns, office chairs, flights to meet clients, promotional videos, staff bonuses, 12 of them, signed under my account. Most people would have seen a pile of expenses. I saw love letters, the kind that don't get framed or posted on Instagram. As I sifted through them, I realized something. I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been used silently, willingly. And maybe that was the worst part. How easily I'd let it happen in the name of love. When Islawa finally walked through the door at noon, she looked collected. No shame, no apology. Just her usual poised self and designer sunglasses and a blazer I'd gifted her last Christmas. She took them off and looked at me like I was a minor inconvenience. "Read," she said, setting down her bag. About last night, I raised a hand gently. You don't have to explain. But of course she did. It was a curated event. We had to keep the guest list tight. Sponsors, investors, internal leads. You didn't think I qualified. Her eyes darted. It wasn't personal. That was the line that did it. That's when I finally looked her in the eye and said, "It was always personal. You just stopped seeing me as part of it." She rolled her eyes. "Reed, don't do this. You're being dramatic." I almost laughed. Dramatic? After being thrown out of a party I helped pay for? After hearing someone call me a beggar while my wife stood beneath chandeliers I'd funded? I didn't argue. Instead, I walked over to the dining table, placed a folder down, and slid it toward her. "You want to talk facts? Let's talk." She opened it confused. Inside were neatly printed spreadsheets, expenses tracked over the past 7 years. My name, my cards, my accounts. A timeline of invisible support. Each column was labeled date, purpose, payment type, amount, notes, total support value, $198,740.34. She stared at the number. "What is this?" "Our story, the part you never tell," she said. "Nothing." I leaned back in my chair. "You didn't just forget me. You erased me and I let you." Because I thought love was about giving. But at some point, love became an invoice with only one name at the bottom. "Red," she started, but stopped. "I didn't ask you to do all this. You expected it, and I kept delivering." Her expression shifted, defensive, proud. "This isn't fair. You always said you believed in what I was building." "I did," I said. "But now I realize you were never building it with me. You were building it on me." The silence between us felt thick, almost physical, like we were sitting in the ruins of a home we both pretended was still standing. I stood up slowly and looked at her for a long moment. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "I'm not looking for that." "Then what do you want?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Nothing. For once I want absolutely nothing." And I meant it. There's a special kind of grief that comes from realizing you were never truly seen. That you were loved for your usefulness, not your presence. And that once your usefulness runs out, you become disposable. That night, I didn't touch dinner. I sat on the balcony, sipping a glass of wine alone, watching the city lights flicker on. Isla stayed in her office down the hall, doors closed, walls growing. I didn't cry. I didn't pack a bag. Not yet. I wasn't done thinking. I wasn't done feeling. But the shift had already begun, and somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered, "She doesn't get to do this again, not without consequence." I didn't plan to go to the gala, not really. Originally, I thought I'd just leave the gift on her desk, send a quick text, and head back home. Let her shine. Let her have her moment. That's what she always said she needed. Space to be seen. And for years, I gave it. But something about that night pulled at me. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was foolish hope that maybe, just maybe, after everything I'd poured into her company, into her, I'd show up and she'd look at me like she used to, with warmth, with gratitude, with even a sliver of the love I'd spent years wrapping around her like armor. So, I ironed the tux. It wasn't new, but it still fit like it had the first time. The same one I wore when we danced under dim fairy lights on our wedding night. Back then, we couldn't afford a ballroom. We'd rented a small community space, filled it with secondhand string lights and borrowed chairs. She had whispered to me, "Someday we'll host something in a place like that," pointing at a glossy ad in a bridal magazine. I remembered that ad now because it looked eerily similar to where the Arento and Gray Gala was being held. The irony was sharp. We made it, and I had helped us get there. So I went quietly. No driver, no fanfare. I booked a cab, stepped out 2 blocks away, and walked in with the timepiece in my inner pocket, fingers resting against the box like I could transfer some warmth into it. I passed guests in velvet and silk, voices spilling into the street. My name wasn't on the list. I already knew that. I wasn't here for a seat. I was here to see it with my own eyes. I stood on the sidewalk across from the entrance behind the valet station, just out of view. And there she was, Isla, my wife, centerpiece of the night. She glided down the carpet like she was born for it. Cameras flashed. Her silver gown caught every light like a mirror. She waved, smiled, laughed, rehearsed, but captivating. I watched her pose with executives, board members, and yes, Jared. Jared, tall, tan, that fake, casual confidence he always carried like a trophy. He was standing too close, too familiar, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in months. Not at home, not with me. I stepped back into the shadows, my stomach twisting, not from jealousy, but from clarity. I didn't belong here. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because they had carefully edited me out. I tried not to be bitter. Really, I tried to remind myself that ambition changes people, that success shifts the dynamics, that sometimes people forget themselves in the process of becoming someone new. But the more I watched, the harder it became to excuse what I was seeing. They toasted with crystal glasses. The ballroom, draped in white and gold, held over 100 guests, all handpicked, all included. And yet, not one of them had my name on their lips, not even hers. I stepped closer, drawn in by the sound of her voice over the mic. A toast. "I want to thank the people who believed in me when this was just a dream," she said. Gin lifted, eyes sparkling. "To my team, my partners, and my co-founder in spirit, Jared Gray. You are the other half of this company's heartbeat." The room clapped loudly. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. She continued, "To those who gave me space to grow, who cheered from the sidelines, thank you. This isn't just my night. It's ours. Sidelines. That's where I live now. A faceless cheerleader in the shadows. A thank you. Lumped in with general gratitude. Not a name, not a face, not even a nod. I looked down at the gift in my pocket. It felt heavier than before. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I think I was still holding on to some hope. So, I did something stupid. I tried to go in not to crash it, not to make a scene, just to say congratulations, to see her face to face, maybe feel like I existed again. That's when the security guard stopped me. The same scene replayed. Name? I told him. He didn't even look at the list. You're not cleared for entry. I asked quietly if he could check again. He didn't. Instead, he looked to the side, and there stood Jared. He walked over with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Reed. Hey, sorry, man. This is kind of an internal thing. I looked him over. Internal? Yeah, you know, staff, stakeholders. It's been tight. I paid for half the venue, I said calmly. He raised his eyebrows. You were reimbursed? I wasn't. He gave a low chuckle like I was making something awkward. It's not the time or place, buddy. You'll make her uncomfortable. And that's when I saw Isla watching from inside the doorway. Our eyes met. She didn't come forward, didn't wave, didn't say anything. Just looked, and then she turned her back. The guard took a step forward. Sir, I'm leaving, I said, lifting my hand. But Jared, because he couldn't help himself, leaned in and muttered, This is her world now. Might be time to stop holding her back. That was it. I didn't punch him, didn't throw the box, didn't scream. I just smiled. That quiet, chilling kind of smile, because I knew something he didn't. He might have had the lights, the champagne, the crowd tonight. But the moment she needed the foundation of that world, the quiet deposits, the funding, the favors, the loyalty, it would all start shaking, and I would no longer be there to hold it still. I walked away, the box still in my pocket. I passed the photographers, the valet, the crowds. I didn't turn back, not once, because I'd finally seen it clearly. I wasn't a part of the celebration. I was the scaffolding they used to build it, and then discarded the moment the building stood tall enough. And now, I was done pretending that was okay. When I got home that night, I didn't switch on the lights. I didn't need to. The apartment was already too familiar. Every chair, every painting, every shelf placed just how she wanted it. I sat down at the dining table, the gift box still in my jacket pocket. The weight of it had shifted. It no longer felt like a symbol of appreciation. It felt like a receipt, a reminder of how long I'd been paying for a love that had quietly gone bankrupt. I reached for my laptop. It was sitting where I always left it, centered, charged, clean. I opened it like I had 100 times before. But tonight, it wasn't for spreadsheets or budgeting. It was for action. I went to the first tab I'd bookmarked weeks ago. Our anniversary trip to Bora Bora, a private villa on the water, complete with a chef, couples massage, and underwater dining experience. I had paid the deposit in full, $113,500. A surprise one I never got to reveal because she'd been too busy with back-to-back strategy sessions. Click, canceled, refund processed. Next, the Aspen Leadership Retreat. This one wasn't for us, but for her team. She told me the board needed a high-end bonding getaway to pitch to new investors. I'd paid the travel agency directly $1,800 for accommodations, ski passes, and executive lodging. Another favor, another unthanked gift. Click access revoked. Confirmation email sent. Then came the corporate software license renewal 1.7 for $100 from my consulting card. I logged into the vendor dashboard and updated the billing details to an empty shell account. Automatic renewal disabled. And the final blow, her upcoming executive lounge renovation. She wanted a private space in the office to think, complete with custom furniture and mood lighting, I'd already wired $2,400 to the design company scheduled to complete in 4 weeks. I made a single phone call. "Red Callahan," I said, calm and polite. "I'd like to cancel the upcoming installation. Please issue a stop order." The payment was personal, not corporate. "I'll send written confirmation now." They complied. It took less than 90 minutes to undo over $60,000 worth of support. Money she never questioned. Support she never asked about twice. She just assumed it would be there because I had always made sure it was. But not this time. By 2 a.m., I was still staring at my screen. The numbers weren't just digits. They were chapters of a story I hadn't realized I'd been writing alone. I thought about all the ways I'd said I love you over the years, without ever using those words in hotel confirmations, in paid invoices, in arranged meetings, fixed computers, last-minute florist runs. And don't worry, I've got it texts. And not once had she stopped to ask if I was okay, if I needed something, if I felt seen. She used to. In the beginning, she'd hug me from behind while I made coffee. She'd say things like, "I couldn't do this without you," or "You're my favorite person." And then those phrases stopped. They were replaced by, "Did you pay the caterer yet?" or "Can you call the driver?" Slowly, love became logistics. Marriage became management. And now I was reducing my role back to 0. I logged into our shared calendar and deleted myself from every upcoming event. No +1 at her award dinner. No appearance at her quarterly fundraiser. I even removed my save contacts from her PR firm's holiday mailing list. And finally, I did something that made my chest feel tight. I opened the shared folder labeled Callahan R. Argento Finances. I created a copy, renamed it Final, then removed my access from the original. I wasn't just pulling the plug on funding, I was pulling the plug on pretending. At 3:12 a.m., I received a notification. Calendar change alert. Aspen retreat booking removed. I ignored it. Then came a second vendor balance dispute. Email from events manager. Then the text. I sell a read. "Did you change something with the Aspen thing? Just got a weird message." I stared at the screen. Not "Hey," not "Can we talk?" Not "Are you okay?" Just straight to the transaction. I didn't reply. I shut the laptop slowly and stood in the middle of the kitchen, breathing in the silence. I looked around at the glass jars on the shelf, labeled, color-coded, perfectly stacked. All her design, all her world. I built it, but it never became mine. I walked to the bedroom, slid the M-blank watch box onto her pillow. Then I packed a bag. Not to leave permanently, but enough to make the silence noticeable. As I zipped the suitcase, a memory crept in. Her voice from years ago. "If I ever get too big for myself, promise me you'll remind me who I really am." I almost smiled because this was that moment, and she hadn't even noticed it arrived. At exactly 9:07 p.m. the next evening, my phone lit up. I had just poured a glass of scotch. Nothing fancy, just something smooth enough to take the edge off, and was sitting on the balcony of the hotel I checked into that morning. A small place, quiet. Nothing like the marble and glass loft Isla and I called home. But it felt real, simple, honest. The screen buzzed again. I sell a 2 missed calls. I let it ring out. Then came the texts. I sell a read. "Did you cancel the Bali suite?" "Isla, what's going on with the Aspen payment?" The agency said the deposit bounced. Marcy, her assistant. "Hey, sorry to bother you, but quick question. Did you change the payment method for the gala videographer?" They emailed about a voided charge, super confused. I took another sip and scrolled. "Jared, yo, did you pull the plug on the caterer?" What the hell, man? That one made me pause. Man, he had never called me that before. Never messaged me directly unless it was about logistics. Always filtered his needs through Esla. But now they needed me. Not because they missed me, but because the foundation was crumbling and the person who kept it level had finally stepped back. The flood came next. Ping, ping, ping. A waterfall of alerts from the payment processor. Notice autopay failure. Argento and gray. Annual licensing renewal. Reminder. Travel itinerary voided. Contact your agent to reschedule. Warning. Office renovation project paused due to insufficient funds. I set the phone down without replying, not because I was being cruel, but because silence, real deliberate silence, speaks louder than any revenge speech or petty argument ever could. At 9:41 p.m., another call buzzed in, then another, then another. By the time I finished the scotch, the tally was 36 missed calls, 17 texts, and 2 voicemails, both from Isla. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I walked to the hotel lobby, handed the front desk a polite smile, and requested no further calls be patched through to my room. I turned off notifications, placed the phone face down on the nightstand, and for the first time in what felt like years, I went to sleep without a to-do list waiting in the morning. But rest doesn't always bring peace. I woke up at 6:13 a.m. to soft knocking. At first, I thought it was housekeeping. Then I heard it, that voice. Tired, a little frantic, muffled through the door. "Reed, are you in there?" I sat up slowly. She knocked again. "Please just open the door." I didn't move right away. I just listened. Her breathing was uneven. No heels today. No confident footsteps or clipped tone. Just Ila Rai stripped of pretense. Not the version she gave the media or the board. The version she only let me see when things went wrong. Still, I hesitated. It took 3 more knocks before I got up, pulled on a shirt, and opened the door. She looked nothing like the woman from the gala. No makeup, hair tied back, pale, wrinkled shirt like she hadn't changed since the night before. "Hi," she said, voice soft. She tried to smile, but it collapsed halfway. I stepped aside. She entered the room quietly, I scanning the small space. 1 bed, 1 chair, a half-open suitcase on the floor. No extravagance, no luxury, just me as I've always been. "I've been trying to call," she said, wringing her hands. I saw silence stretch between us. She sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed by the window. "You didn't have to cancel everything," she said finally. It felt vindictive. I turned to her calm. Was it vindictive to leave me off the guest list? To stand there while they called me a beggar? She looked down. That wasn't supposed to happen. The list was curated for image. "For your image," I corrected. She didn't argue. "I'm not trying to fight," she said, voice cracking a little. I didn't expect you to go this far." "This far?" I echoed. "You mean finally drawing a line?" "Is that what this is?" she whispered. "Drawing a line or erasing me?" I sat in the chair across from her. "No, Isla. I'm erasing myself from a version of this marriage where I only existed when you needed a transaction. Where my love was measured in wire transfers and logistical favors. Where you celebrated with people who didn't even know my name." I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. I nodded. "Exactly. You didn't realize." She went quiet again, chewing on her lower lip. "The truth is," she said slowly, "I didn't want the world to see how much I still leaned on you. I wanted to look independent, strong, self-made." "You could have been all those things," I said without cutting me out. "I know," she admitted, tears now gathering. "I thought I was proving something." "You were," I said. "But not what you think." She looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw regret in her eyes that felt real. Not performative, not dramatic, just real. "I miss you," she said. "No," I replied gently. "You miss what I did for you." She flinched, like the words hit harder than she expected. "That's not fair. It's honest." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, opened something, then handed it to me. A list of paused projects, declined payments, a note from one of her investors demanding clarity before next week's pitch. "They're all freaking out," she whispered. "I'm not your fixer anymore." She nodded, eyes brimming. "So, what happens now?" I stood up, walked to the desk, took out a printed copy of the spreadsheet I prepared, the one I hadn't shown her yet, every expense I'd covered, every act of silent support, labeled, dated, totaled. I handed it to her. She didn't speak as she read. Her eyes widened, her mouth trembled. "You kept track of all this?" "No," I said. "I kept track of me because no one else was." Her tears finally fell. And I didn't comfort her. Not out of cruelty, but because I was finally learning what it felt like to let someone else sit with the consequences of their choices. "I need to think," she whispered. "I've already started." I didn't expect her to come back. Not so soon, anyway. The last time we spoke, if you could call it that, it ended with her holding the printed spreadsheet in her hands, silently crying while I sat by the window, arms crossed, not moving to console her. It wasn't out of coldness. I just didn't have anything left to give. That morning, I had planned to go on a long walk, maybe stop at the small cafe near the water and clear my head. I hadn't been sleeping much. Even though I wasn't at home anymore, her presence still followed me. Memories in my luggage, her voice in the back of my mind. Guilt curled around my shoulders like a scarf I couldn't take off. But then the knock came. Soft, tentative. I knew before I opened the door who it was. She was dressed differently this time. No heels, no statement outfit. Just Isla jeans, sneakers, and a sweatshirt that I vaguely remembered buying her one winter. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, no makeup on, and her eyes were red around the edges like she hadn't slept either. "Hi," she said. "I know I shouldn't be here. I didn't know where else to go." I said nothing. Just stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly for a moment by the small table, glancing around the modest hotel room like she'd never seen me live so simply. And maybe she hadn't. Our home had always been modern, curated, sharp. This room had none of that. Just a lamp with a loose bulb and a carpet that probably hadn't been replaced in 5 years. But it was peaceful, and it was mine. "For now, I thought you might still be mad," she said softly. I poured her a glass of water and handed it over. "I'm not mad," I replied. "I'm just done pretending." She flinched slightly at that, sat down, cradling the glass like it gave her something to hold on to. "I don't know how to say this without sounding selfish," she began, "but I didn't realize how much I took you for granted until you were gone." I stayed quiet. She sighed. "Everything's unraveling. Aspen, Bali, the board's losing confidence. I had to call off the lounge renovation. Jared keeps trying to spin things, but it's not working." "I didn't make those decisions lightly," I said. "I made them because I was tired of holding up a world that didn't leave room for me." Her voice cracked. "I know. I tried to warn you," I added. "I tried to bring it up so many times. Every time you brushed it aside like my support was some unspoken obligation." "I know," she said again, quieter. And I was wrong. There was something heavy in her voice now. No sharp edges, no deflection, just raw truth. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it gave it a place to settle. I thought I was building something for us, she whispered. But I was really building something with you holding all the bricks. And I never once asked if your hands were bleeding. That image stopped me for a moment. I sat across from her, folding my arms slowly. They were, but I kept going because I believed in what you were doing. I know, she said. I was brimming again. I know you did. And I twisted that belief into expectation that you'd always be there, that I could just keep pulling. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to know that I see it now. Everything what I did, what I failed to do. I let her words hang in the room, and I realized I had a choice. Not the choice to take her back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the choice to speak, not as her partner, not as her provider, but as myself. Fully honestly, you didn't just leave me off a guest list, I said. You left me out of the story, out of your narrative. You turned us into a performance. And backstage, I was folding props while you took every bow. She looked up at me, guilt thick in her eyes. I stood in that ballroom, I continued. Not because I needed the spotlight, but because I needed to remember who I was to you. And when I saw your face, when you looked at me like I was an interruption, I knew. She lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to treat you that way. But you did, I replied. And the truth is, if I hadn't pulled the funding, if I hadn't made it inconvenient, you wouldn't be sitting here. She didn't argue, and that at least was honest. I came because I wanted to say something to your face, she said after a moment. I'm sorry for every time I made you feel invisible. For every moment, I made you feel like an employee in your own marriage. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. But still, I stayed still. Sorry, I said slowly. Doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't put me back at the table. I know, she said, but maybe it opens the door. She stood then slowly and reached into her pocket. She pulled out the blank box I'd left on her pillow. She didn't open it, just held it out. I didn't accept this gift the way I should have, she said, because I didn't see what it really was. It wasn't just a watch. It was every year, every hour, every sacrifice, and I ignored it. I let others call you names in front of me. I let you stand outside the world you helped build. She placed the box on the nightstand and stepped back. I'm not asking for another chance right now, she said. But I hope maybe one day we can look at each other and not feel resentment. I stood too, met her eyes. That depends on what you build from here and whether you remember who helped lay the foundation. She nodded, and for once she didn't try to spin it or soften it or walk around it. She simply said, Thank you, Reed, for everything, even what I didn't deserve. Then she walked to the door, but before she left, she turned around. I'll make it right, she said. And then she was gone. I stood in that hotel room, silent for a long time after. The mop blanket sat beside me, unopened. The city hummed outside. But inside, something had finally shifted. Not everything was fixed, but the truth had finally been spoken. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. 2 days passed after Isla left the hotel room. She hadn't called again. No texts, no emails, nothing from Jared either, which was a surprise considering how loud he'd been before. But silence has a strange way of revealing who's truly invested and who's just panicking. In their case, it was obvious. The only reason they called was because the money stopped. Not because they missed me, but because the machine I'd been oiling had started squeaking. And I didn't miss the machine. But I did find myself thinking about her, about everything we built, and how we never really sat down to balance the emotional books. So that morning, I opened the original spreadsheet, the one I had built over months, years even, to track every dollar I'd contributed to Eslaw's success. At first, it was just about keeping records. But now it felt different. Now it felt like something more like proof. Not for her, for me. I added a final tab to the bottom, emotional cost. Not literal numbers, just a space to write what each expense actually represented. I wrote things like February 2017, $2,500 for rebranding, sleepless nights, canceled plans, skipped anniversary dinner, July 2018 for $1,000 client acquisition trip to Montreal, missing my cousin's wedding. November 2019, $3,200 for the company's team building retreat, swallowing resentment when I wasn't invited. Line after line, I mapped out the difference between support and sacrifice. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the invisibility, the erasure. I closed the laptop. Then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed, not with a call from Isla, but with a news alert. Argentine and Gray hit with sudden staff resignation, citing lack of transparency and leadership. My brow furrowed. I clicked through. Corbin, her lead designer, had resigned. And in his statement he said, "Leadership without loyalty fails." We didn't know where the heart of the company was anymore. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I didn't reach out. I just read and I listened to the silence that followed because for once it wasn't mine to fill. But by afternoon, the storm found me anyway. I had just stepped out for coffee. My first real outing in days when I saw her again. Not Isla. Marcy, her assistant. She was standing outside the cafe like she'd been waiting for me, dressed plainly, hair tied back, nervous eyes flicking around like she wasn't sure if I'd run or scream. "Reed," she said, walking up fast. "I swear, I'm not here to start anything. I need to talk to someone who understands what's going on." I didn't answer right away. "I quit," she said, breathless. This morning, I raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect that. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But things are imploding over there. Investors are backing out. The holiday campaign launch got shelled. Corbin leaving was a blow, but it's more than that. It's like Esot cracked." I didn't say anything. I sipped my coffee and let her keep talking. "She came into the office yesterday." Marcy went on, and she wasn't yelling or blaming anyone like I expected. She just sat at her desk and stared at that framed photo of the team from 3 years ago. "You were in it, you know. The retreat in Soma. I remember that retreat. I'd paid for the house and cooked meals for everyone. They thanked me like I was the caterer." She kept saying, "I let him become invisible." Marcy's voice softened. "I don't think she's okay." I let that sit for a while. And then, for the first time, I felt something that surprised me. Not satisfaction, not justice, but sadness. Because for all the damage, all the cold moments and cut corners, part of me still remembered the version of Isla who used to cry from joy over small victories. The version who used to grab my hand under restaurant tables just to feel grounded. That woman had disappeared somewhere along the line, swallowed by success, maybe, or by the constant pressure to be more. And maybe I had disappeared too in a different way, letting myself become essential but invisible, needed but never acknowledged. Marcy pulled a folded paper from her purse. "She asked me to give this to you. Said she didn't trust herself to say it right." I took the note, not quickly, not out of eagerness, but because I knew she wouldn't have written unless she meant it. After Marcy left, I sat on a bench, unwrapped the fold carefully, and began to read. Read. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore without sounding like I wanted something. And maybe that's the problem. I always assumed you give without asking, love without limits. Serve without condition. I never stopped needing you, but I stopped showing you. And that's my failure. You were the one thing in my life I never questioned. I trusted you so deeply, I forgot to protect that trust. I built a world and locked you out of it, thinking I was proving my independence. But all I really proved was that I'd lost sight of the man who built the first bricks with me. I don't expect you to come back. I don't even know if I deserve to ask that. But I hope you find peace, even if it's without me. Hila. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix anything, but it was real. That night, I didn't go back to the hotel. I didn't go to our old place either. I booked a new room somewhere further from the city near the water with no memory carved into its walls. And I sat at the edge of the dock, letter folded beside me, the Mont Blanc watch ticking steadily in my hand. I looked out at the horizon and realized that maybe this wasn't the ending, but it was a reckoning. And in some strange, quiet way, it was enough for now. The downfall didn't come as a storm. It came like a quiet shift in the area. Small things unraveling at the edges until there was no way to deny that the structure was failing. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't reply to Isla's letter, at least not right away. But I watched and I listened. By the end of the week, it was in the news again. Argento and Gray postpones Q3 launch due to internal restructuring. Restructuring, they said, as though that word could hide the truth. But those who were close enough knew exactly what was happening. The people she depended on were gone. The investors uneasy. The once airtight confidence of the company now leaking through every open crack. Jared had gone radio silent. No surprise there. His loyalty was tied to outcomes, not people. Meanwhile, Isla, well, she was quiet too. Not her usual curated quiet, the kind that came with polished press releases and elegant photo oots, but a real raw silence. I didn't hear from her, but I heard about her. From Marcy, from one of her board advisors, even from Corbin, who sent me a brief message on LinkedIn saying, "Should have seen it sooner. She was walking on your shoulders the whole time." That line stayed with me for days. Still, I didn't interfere. I wasn't out for revenge. I wasn't sitting somewhere plotting how to make her suffer. I had simply stopped holding up the weight of someone else's empire. And in my absence, the air had changed. A week later, I was walking through a small artisan market on the east side of town, picking up a few things from my new place. Candles, loose-leaf tea, a handmade leather wallet, when I noticed a young woman standing at a pop-up booth. She was animated, engaged, showing a product demo to a group of curious onlookers. I wouldn't have stopped except something about the logo on her banner caught my eye. I walked closer. Zaire, natural home diffusers, crafted by nature, engineered for peace. And then I recognized her. Zadeh, she was the startup founder Isla had laughed about once at a dinner party, dismissing her as too grassroots to scale. I remember Isla saying, "She's got spirit, but not much structure." Now here she was, booth full, customers leaning in, energy humming like electricity around her. She looked up and noticed me. "Reed Callahan?" she asked. I nodded, half smiling. "That's me." She walked over. "I didn't think you'd actually follow up after that email." I said I would. I said I meant it. A few days earlier, I had taken a portion of the refunded Bora Bora money, the trip Island never got to take, and invested it into Zaid's project. It wasn't a huge amount, just enough to help her secure her first warehouse space. I hadn't done it for any public reason. I did it because, unlike Isla's crowd, Zadie looked like someone who still knew how to say thank you. She grinned and held out her hand. You believed in me before the numbers looked pretty. That means a lot. I shook it. You earned it. We talked for 10 minutes about the business, her next steps, the grant application I offered to co-write with her. She didn't fawn, didn't flatter. She simply thanked me again and again with sincerity that couldn't be faked. And as I walked away, I realized something. I wasn't just finding peace away from Isla. I was finding purpose. Later that evening, as I sat in my small living room with one of Zade's diffusers running, my phone buzzed again. Another article, another fallout. Investor withdraws from Orento and Gray, citing internal discord and transparency issues. I exhaled deeply, not out of joy, not even out of vindication, but out of closure. That was the word that kept circling my head these days. Closure, not revenge, not punishment. Just the slow, deliberate process of separating what once was from what should never be again. And then, without warning, I got a message from Isla. Just a photo, no caption, no emoji, just a single photo of the Mont Blanc watch I gave her, resting on her now empty desk. I stared at it for a moment. The desk used to be cluttered with client files, PR plans, branding decks. Now, only the watch remained. It didn't feel like a guilt trip. It felt like a symbol, maybe even a surrender. Still, I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back and looked around my new space. No marble floors, no curated art on the walls, just warmth, honesty. The scent of cedar wood from the diffuser swirling in the air. And in that quiet moment, I realized I hadn't just withdrawn my money from her world. I had reclaimed my presence from a place where it was never properly held. And finally, I could breathe again. It had been almost 3 weeks since I saw Isla. 3 weeks since I pulled the financial cord that quietly powered her world. 3 weeks since she sat in my hotel room and cried for the empire she built. For the man she forgot, for the truth that finally surfaced. And in those 3 weeks, I didn't once reach out. I didn't need to. Some wounds don't heal because someone comes back. Some wounds heal because you stop reopening them for someone who never brought you peace in the first place. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. The anger had burned off. What remained was something colder, clearer, a sort of stillness I hadn't felt in years. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Quiet street with floors, nothing too flashy, just enough. And I started doing something I hadn't done in a long time, living on my own terms. One morning, I got an email from Zadie. The subject line read, "You might want to watch this." Inside was a video clip less than a minute long. From a local entrepreneurship panel hosted at the City Hall. Zadie had been invited to speak about grassroots funding and community-based investment. In the clip, she stood in front of a modest audience, confidently addressing the room with the kind of energy that Isla used to have before she traded gratitude for grandeur. And then Zadie said something that made me freeze. There was one person, just one, who believed in me when I was just selling prototypes in mason jars at street fairs. He didn't ask for shares or branding rights. He didn't demand a spotlight. He just said, "Let me help you grow." That kind of support doesn't just fund your business. It reminds you who you are. The room applauded. My chest tightened. Not with pride exactly, but with something more tender. Something like being remembered. For once, I hadn't been the invisible partner. I'd been the difference maker. Not behind the curtain, not erased from the photo. Present, visible. I shut my laptop and leaned back in the chair, letting that small moment settle inside me. And it was right then that my phone lit up with a text from Isla. I said, "Are you free to meet this evening?" I stared at the screen. It wasn't dramatic. "No, please. No guilt-laced paragraphs. Just a question." I waited 5 minutes. Then I typed back where. We met at a small restaurant in the Arts District. Not the kind of place she used to favor. No reservations, no valet, no curated plating. Just warm lighting, soft music, and wood tables with small candles. I arrived first. She came 10 minutes later, dressed in muted colors, no makeup, hair down and loose. She looked tired. Not worn down, but like someone who'd finally stopped running. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down. "I was curious," I replied. The waiter brought water. Neither of us looked at the menu. She folded her hands and stared at them for a long moment. "I'm not sure how to start." "Just start," I said. She exhaled. "The company is smaller now. We've cut staff, returned investor funds. Jared left, resigned 2 weeks ago, and I didn't stop him. I didn't react. I just listened. I've spent a lot of time sitting with the damage, not just the business fallout, but what I did to you. How blind I let myself become." She paused, blinking back the shine in her eyes. "I used to be so afraid of not being taken seriously," she continued. "Being a woman in this field, being underestimated, dismissed. It felt like I had to always be loud, always polished, always in control. And I thought needing you made me look weak. So I hid you." "That was your choice," I said quietly. "But it wasn't just hiding me. It was erasing me. And not just from the company, from your life." She nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry. I know sorry can't undo what I did. But I wanted to say it again. This time without excuses." The table fell quiet for a few seconds. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a document. She slid it across to me. I opened it. Legal paperwork, transfer of business shares, a formal record of repayment for all funds I had contributed over the last 7 years. I had the board review everything. She said I added 10% on top interest for time. You never asked for equity, but I'm giving it anyway. You earn more than this, but this is what I can start with. I looked at the document for a long moment. I wasn't sure what to say. "This isn't about fixing things between us," she added. "I don't expect you to come back. I don't even know if I deserve that. This is just me taking responsibility." And then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "I want you to know that I'm stepping down." My eyes lifted from Orento and Gray. She nodded. "Effective next quarter." I realized I don't know who I am anymore. I've been leading on a hollow platform for too long. I'm taking a sabbatical. No press release. Just quietly stepping back. That silenced me because in all my imaginings of what she might do next, that was never one of them. "I thought stepping away would be defeat," she said. "But I think it might be the first real choice I've made in years." The waiter came. We ordered 2 teas. For the rest of the hour, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about books, travel, how the sky seemed brighter lately. Simple things, real things. And before she left, Isla stood at the table and said, "I hope you find happiness, Reed. Whether that path leads back to me or far away from me. I hope you feel free." I nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I actually did. Free. That night, I didn't go home with answers, but I walked away with peace, and sometimes that's more than enough. 2 months later, I stood on the platform at Kyoto Station, backpack over my shoulder, passport tucked neatly in the chest pocket of my jacket. It was early, just past 7 a.m., and the mist still clung to the rooftops, like it was unsure whether to lift or stay. I breathed in the air, crisp and clean, tinged with the scent of cedar and distant street food warming up for the day. I hadn't planned this trip months in advance. It wasn't some bucket list destination I dreamed of since childhood. No, this trip was impulse. It was instinct. It was the exact opposite of everything my life had been for the last 7 years. And it felt right. I boarded the train without ceremony. No fanfare, no Instagram post, no matching suitcases or synchronized itineraries, just me. And that, for once, was more than enough. As the train glided along the tracks, the city slowly gave way to small towns and countryside. Fields blurred by, hills rose like old friends waiting quietly. I leaned my head against the glass, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to check emails, reply to anyone, or anticipate someone else's needs. I was just still, and that stillness was sacred. I thought about Isla, but not in the way I used to. She had sent one more message a few weeks ago. No questions, no requests. Just a photo of her on a hiking trail somewhere in Oregon, standing next to a tree she'd captioned, "Learning how to slow down, one step at a time." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. There are some journeys we must take separately. Even if we once walked side by side, she was on hers. I was on mine. And that was okay. After arriving at my guest house, I spent the next few days doing something I hadn't done in years, choosing myself. I woke up without an alarm. I ate slowly, sometimes even skipping meals just because I wanted to wander instead. I visited shrines with no tour guides. I walked for hours with no destination. One morning, I sat beside a koi pond for nearly an hour just watching the fish move. No meetings, no planning, no background noise except birdsong and wind. And the more time passed, the more I realized something. Healing doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or revelations. Sometimes it's quiet, like waking up and realizing your chest doesn't ache anymore, or walking past a couple on the street and not comparing their smiles to what you lost. It's sitting with yourself and not needing to explain why you left or why you stayed too long. That's what closure looks like. Not a door slamming, but a door gently closing behind you while you walk forward, not looking back. One evening, while walking through the historic district, I passed a small shop that sold handmade timepieces. Not luxury watches, not flashy status symbols, just wood, leather, and care. I stepped inside and struck up a conversation with the owner. A gray-haired man with soft eyes and hands that moved like he'd been building time instead of keeping it. He showed me a small piece. Maplewood face, navy blue band, hand carved with the words Ichigo, itchy on the back. One moment, one meeting, he explained. It means every moment is once in a lifetime. Every person, every chance never repeats. I bought it not to replace the Mont Blanc I gave Isla, but to mark the moment I stopped waiting to be chosen and chose myself instead. That night, I stood on a small bridge, the city lights reflected in the river below. Lanterns floated along the banks. Children laughed in the distance. I checked the time, not out of obligation, but because I could. The watch read 900 p.m. And for the first time in a long, long time, it didn't feel like I was running out of time. It felt like time had finally caught up with me and said, "You're right on schedule." I turned off my phone. No buzzes, no pings, no sudden knocks on hotel doors or emergency calls asking me to fix something I didn't break. Just silence and peace. And then I smiled because I finally understood what all those missed calls, all those panicked emails, all those desperate messages were really about. They weren't about me. They were about losing the version of me that made everything easier for them. The silent builder, the giver, the man who never said no. But I wasn't that man anymore. And the best part, I didn't have to prove it to anyone. Not with cold revenge, not with court documents, not with rage, just with absence. Because sometimes disappearing is the loudest thing you can do. I spent the rest of the week exploring Kyoto like a man discovering life again. I journaled. I took pictures no one else would ever see. I smiled at strangers. I even helped a lost tourist find her train. And as I packed my things on the final day, I looked around at the small room. The folded linens, the single chair by the window, the bamboo mat in the corner. And I whispered a quiet thank you to the stillness, to the silence, to the version of me that walked away without slamming the door. As I rolled my suitcase down the narrow street toward the station, I passed a small cafe, the kind Isla would have hated. No menu in English, no Wi-Fi, no brand presence, just steam in the window and quiet music playing. I walked in, sat down, ordered something I couldn't pronounce, and as the steam rose from the cup, I leaned back in my chair, checked the time one last time, and smiled. Not because someone finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself.